Minds, it's Alora. Today I'm here to talk about all of the books that I read in July, so this will be my July wrap-up, July reading review, whatever you want to call it. So I actually feel like the month of July went by really slowly, which was in a way quite torturous because I was taking almost double a full class load and working at the same time. But actually I managed to read quite a bit. I'm really pretty proud of myself here. And yeah, I did really well throughout this month. I actually managed to read a total of 8 books. One of them is sort of a half book. I don't know if we can really count it, but I'm counting it. So let's just go ahead and get into the wrap-up. The first book that I picked up is the half book that I'm counting, and that is Nerdy Nummies by Rosanna Pansino. Now, I'm sure a lot of people know who she is. She hosts the YouTube channel Nerdy Nummies. She does all of these really crazy, kooky, nerdy, obviously, fun recipe ideas. So, look at this planet cake. There are a bunch of different subjects in here. So we've got constellation star cookies, Grace. Okay, well at this point I've said it a million times, but I really love reading through cookbooks, so I just start at the beginning and I flip through every single page and I read all of the words and all of the instructions and ingredients and just ogle at all of the pictures, and then I generally don't end up making anything in the cookbooks, but I love to do it anyway. It's one of my favorite hobbies and pastimes, looking at baking cookbooks or cookbooks in general. This one was really fun for that because the photos are gorgeous and she provides step-by-step instructions in the form of photographs, which is fantastic if you're a visual learner like I am. So I'm just going to really quickly give you the table of contents. We have chapter 1 is math and science, then we have space, fantasy and sci-fi, gaming, tech and web, and geeky treats. This was a lot of fun. I think that I ended up giving it a 4 stars out of 5. It was a blast. I think I'm gonna try to make maybe the zombie brain cake for my dad's next birthday or something like that. That would be fun. After that, I finally got to the buddy read that I was supposed to read earlier in the summer, and that was The Circle by Dave Eggers. This book is something that I was interested in because of the movie coming out with Emma Watson and Tom Hanks, and I absolutely adore Emma Watson, so I wanted to read the book before I watched the movie, even though it hasn't gotten super stellar reviews or anything, but I thought, hey, you know what, maybe everybody's wrong, maybe I'll really like it. It's the story of this young woman who goes to work for this huge conglomerate company that's basically like a social media company that's keeping track of everybody's every move. I would say it's a social warning type book that's, you know, alerting us all to the potential dangers of social media. And I thought that it did a good job of that. I thought that it was a really interesting topic, but it just wasn't handled in a very interesting way. I was kind of bored by the story, didn't really like the main character. Overall, 3 out of 5 stars for me. After that, I read a book that has a lot of current social relevance, and that was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This is a book about the Black Lives Matter movement. The main character, Star, I believe was her name, witnesses one of her best friends be shot by a police officer for no apparent reason. And this was a really heavy book, and I will admit that there were times that I was in tears. That I was really in tears. Not even a little bit, but I was sobbing. So it was heavy, it was powerful, it was well done. I didn't love my reading experience. So this is just me personally. I don't know if it was all of the colloquialisms, the way that the characters were speaking. It was really hard for me to read in a flowy manner. So eloquent. Couldn't read it in a flowy manner. But it was just a little bit harder for me to get into. But just because I didn't really enjoy the experience of reading it doesn't mean that I don't think it's an important social topic and that it's fantastic that young adult literature is addressing subjects such as the Black Lives Matter movement. So I definitely give major props to Angie Thomas for putting all of these thoughts into one book and making it a story that young adult audiences can enjoy. So 4 out of 5 stars. The next book was probably my favorite reading experience of the month, and the book was Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. So this is a pretty famous book on writing, and it gives a lot of writing advice, also a lot of life advice. It's really skinny, and the reason why I had such a fantastic reading experience with this book this month is because I went home to my parents' house for a weekend, and I sat up on their 3rd story deck and I read in the sunshine for hours on end and just ignored my responsibilities and basked in the sunshine taking in advice about writing and life, and it was really, really lovely. It was a much needed break. There were several other things that I liked about this book. Not only did I think her advice was sound and on point, but it just made me feel inspired and jazzed and wanting to be creative again, which is definitely the point of a writing book. And then the other thing is that she brought up a lot of authors that sounded interesting to me that I ended up Googling and then putting some of their books on my Amazon wishlist. Pro tip, if you are spending too much money on books like I used to, start an Amazon wishlist or another type of wishlist where you can just write all of the titles down so you don't feel like you're going to lose track of them and you can still browse through them upon occasion. Or if you want to buy a book, you can go through and find one that looks interesting to you at the moment, but then you don't buy it right away. So what I used to do is I used to go on Amazon and add all of the books I was interested in to my cart and then hit purchase, and my bank account was like, ouch, and my bookshelves were like, sag, and you know, it was just not the best situation for me at the moment. I love buying books, but I was definitely overdoing it. I was gaining more books than I was reading, which is crazy because I read almost 90 books a year on average, and I was buying more than that per year, and that's just a little bit much. So I got an Amazon wishlist, settled myself down a little bit, and now I'm giving this free advice to you. If you have a book buying problem, create a wish list. While I was reading the last few books, I was listening to The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, and this was actually a special edition that was narrated by Claire Danes. Her voice is really velvety and lovely. Initially, I wanted to read/listen to this book because the show, you know, on Hulu has come out and I wanted to watch it, but I thought, you know, I really should listen to the audiobook first or read the book first. So I got it on audiobook and I listened to it and I just didn't love it, and I don't know if it was because I was listening to it on audiobook. Sometimes audiobooks don't work for me. I love Claire Danes' voice, but it just didn't jive. I'm not sure why, so I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I can definitely appreciate what this book meant, especially at the time that it was released in the early to mid 80s. I definitely see the value in this book, and I think it paved the way for a lot of other literature to come, so I respect Margaret Atwood immensely writing this kind of literature in the time in which she was writing. But I personally didn't love the actual story, so 4 out of 5 stars. All of the next books I'm going to go through fairly quickly because I did talk about them in my Booktubeathon wrap-up video, so if you haven't seen that, definitely go on over and check that out. Yes, I am wearing the same shirt. Yes, it is the same day. I wasn't gonna try to fool you and change. Anyway, the first book that I finished for the Booktubeathon was All We Shall Know by Donal Ryan. This is actually a book that Ariel Bissett recommended on her channel. She said it was one of her favorite books of last year, or maybe even her top book of last year, I can't recall. And I just decided to pick it up without knowing anything about it other than the fact that she loved it and I trust her advice. So I started reading it and I was a little confused and I wasn't loving it that much. It's written in a stream of consciousness style, and the paragraphs are really big and long and chunky, and the dialogue doesn't have quotation marks around it, and I was getting really annoyed and frustrated. But then I continued to get into the book and I fell in love with the story, and I fell in love with the language. It was so beautiful and heartbreaking, but beautiful. Oftentimes those two things go hand in hand. So this was a really, really good book. This ended up being a 4.5, 4.75, 5-star book for me. It was about this woman who has an unintended pregnancy, and it's a really controversial pregnancy for a lot of reasons. I don't want to give away too much about the story because it's pretty short, so, you know, don't want to spoil anything for anyone. But it's set in Ireland, and it was a really different backdrop because I don't know very much about Ireland, even though I'm fascinated by it. And so I definitely want to read more by Irish authors. And it was about this woman and her relationship with several other people in her life, and her trying to gain her own self-forgiveness for some of the things that she'd done in the past that she was not proud of. It was really heartwarming and I really enjoyed it. So give this one a go if that sounds like it's up your alley. Throughout the week of Booktubeathon, I was also working on reading Because You Love to Hate Me, 13 Tales of Villainy, which was edited by Amory. And this, as I'm sure most people are aware of, is this anthology that is written by 13 YA authors in collaboration with 13 booktubers. And it was really fun. I gave it a total of 4 stars. There were a lot of 3-star reads in here for me that I just really kind of wanted to be over with, but there were a couple of 5-star reads in here and I just was blown away and wanted more from those authors. So Victoria Schwab, I am going to read more of your books soon, and also Andrew Smith and also some of the other guys. I like the fact that this anthology explored these morally ambiguous characters, or these characters that were not morally ambiguous but they were just bad, but we were coming to terms with why they had made those decisions in their lives. And I am fascinated by villains. I think that psychology is really an interesting subject, obviously since I'm studying it at university. But I thought this was a well put together anthology, and I'm really happy that I got the chance to read a selection of work from all of these different authors so that I could find which authors connected with me and which authors I'd like to read more of in the future. And finally, my last book of not 2017, I'm not doing a year wrap up, Alora. My last book of July was The Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken. Now, I have been listening to this book on audio for the last week or so. I've been listening to it on 1.25 speed, and I normally don't like to do that, but I'm doing it because I've already listened to it in the past. So this is a reread for me, and the reason why I'm rereading / re-listening to it is because I wanted to continue on with the series and I never did the first time around. The first time I read it, I didn't really like it that much. I don't know what star rating I gave it, 3 or maybe 4 if I was being generous. I used to be more generous with star ratings. But I didn't really love it, and I didn't know if it was because I was listening to it on audiobook. Maybe I just wasn't at the right place or time. I don't know what it was. This time around though, I really did enjoy it quite a bit. I definitely gave it a 4-star rating, and I'm planning on continuing on with the next book, so I'll talk about that in my future TBR video.